Hey, everybody, welcome. So fun to see everybody jumping on.
This is perfect. We'll just get started in about 30 seconds.
One of my books is missing. There we go.
All right, Drea, should we get started?
I'd say let's do it.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today on APM Live. So great to see everyone getting on with our friend and author and amazingness, Brittany Hodak. You guys are in for a real treat. Brittany just released her new book officially. Was it yesterday, Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Yeah. So 2 days ago, 48 hours ago, her book came out. And you guys, it's so good. And we have bought a bunch of books that we're going to give away during this event and over the next few days. So if you've registered and you're here, we may have a book just for you. So welcome, Brittany, back to APM.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. You know, anytime I get to hang with you, Melissa, it's a good day. So I'm stoked to be here.
Oh, thank you. You were a session speaker at a APM symposium in 19 or 18. Those years blend because of the whole COVID thing.
Yeah, the before times.
Yeah, it was the before COVID. And like we always ask for surveys on like, how did we do? What do you think of our speakers? And you were like top rated, our #1 speaker. Everyone loved you, loved your session. And it was so fun. And I've seen you speak at other events.
Top speaker. That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, you were a top speaker. So it's so fun to get you back. And as I read through your book, man, some of the stuff, yes, maybe you touched on a little bit at symposium, but there's so much more here. It's incredible. And probably because symposium is like an hour and the book is probably, 6 hours worth of stuff. So it's so good, everyone. So Creating Superfans, this is the book. See, that's out. We love it so much. So let me give Brittany a proper introduction for those who may not know her. So she is award-winning entrepreneur, author, and customer experience speakers who delivers keynotes across the globe to organizations including American Express and the United Nations. That sounds fancy. She has worked with some of the world's biggest brands and entertainers, including Walmart, Disney, Katy Perry, Dolly Parton, and Forbes recently just said of her debut book, Creating Superfans, if you have customers, you need to read this book, period. It was, yes. So with that, welcome officially to the show. So I wanted to ask you, why this book now? Like, what is it about this topic of superfans that feels like so timely and relevant?
Well, I have always loved customer experience. And I feel like over the past several years, there's been like a decline in focus on customer experience, and tech and human interaction are not mutually exclusive, but I feel like customer centricity has sort of fallen as we've become more reliant on shortcuts and apps and algorithms to do some of that interacting for us. So I wanted to write a book that said you can balance automation with relationships. You can balance systems and processes with making people feel like they're the most important part of your business. And so I really wanted to write a book that shined a light on why it's so important to do that, but also gave people a really clear roadmap to that reality. Because I feel like it's easy to say like, oh, go do this, but it's hard if you don't have a blueprint to follow. So I wanted to write this book to help people really become more customer centric so that they could create their own superfans.
Yeah, it did that for me. As I was reading, I was pausing along the way, like evaluating myself, my team, our company, the customers, like where's all those paths connect. I love the word super fan, but will you kind of break it down? Like, why that word? What does it really mean?
Yeah, well, so something that I didn't know until a few years ago, the word superfan has actually been in use for over a century. Merriam-Webster first used the word superfan in the dictionary in 1918, and it was just to describe somebody who was a very enthusiastic fan. And I grew up working in the entertainment industry. I got my first job in radio when I was 16 years old. I worked for several record labels and music magazines and entertainment agencies. And so when I was ready to launch my first company in 2010, I wanted to call it the Superfan Company. And at the time, when I started telling people, everybody was like, aren't superfans like the adults who live in their parents' basement and play video games all day, or like the 12-year-old girls who love the Jonas Brothers or Justin Bieber? And I was like, well, that's part of it, but that's not the totality of the term. And it's been so interesting to see, because that wasn't that long ago. That was 12, 13 years ago. In the past decade, the word superfan has become so much more a part of vernacular and popular culture. And some of that is driven by online fan communities. Some of that, I think, is just driven by the fact that we as a society have realized how much people identify with the things that they would define themselves as super fans of, whether that's a team, whether that's a restaurant, whether that's a service provider in your area that you love. So I define a super fan as a customer who loves what you do so much that they come back and they tell their friends. They've had an amazing experience with you. So you're no longer somebody who they're looking at just based on commodity issues. How much does it cost? How long will it take? How close are they? How convenient is it? They're not making a decision based on those factors anymore. Instead, they're saying you have gone from this potential consideration set of all of these commodity providers to a category of one. You're my person. I don't care how many other people there are, you are my person. And obviously, working in mortgage and real estate, that's what's so critical. You want people to be like, this is my person. You want them to come back to you, and you want them to tell their friends to do the same. And you want, of course, for them to tell strangers on the internet to do the same. So that's how I define a super fan. And this book is written to help make exactly that happen. Like, don't worry about, the one and dones. Worry about converting those customers into those loyal, enthusiastic advocates.
So you mentioned mortgage and real estate. So just to be clear, this absolutely applies. Someone can become, see the loan officer as a rock star in essence. Like, they really do champion, support, and fall in love with that service, right? Is what we're kind of talking about.
Yeah, it's so funny to think about how many people are in the experience business these days, even if they think that they're in the service business. And so my book just came out, as you said, and I made these really cool boxes, like video boxes that have all of these things inside. And a few of the people who've gotten them so far have put them on social media. And I've had probably close to a dozen people reach out to me in the past 3 days to say, who is the vendor that you used for that? We want to do something similar. And it's pained me to have to say to all those people, I would not recommend this vendor. Even though the product came out well and people are like, oh my gosh, I love the product, the experience was a disaster. And so you are in the experience business. You're not just in the business of helping somebody, close the loan and make sure that they're at closing day on time. You are in the experience business. You are the personal advisor for hopefully the rest of the lives of the people who you're helping. And to position yourself as that person who's going to be their trusted advisor, who's going to help them not just with this first loan, but with the next loan. Because you're going to have people like me, like I was ready to put my book out, and I was like, oh man, I want to be able to market and promote this the way I want to. So maybe I need a home equity line of credit. So I picked up the phone and said, like, tell me everything I need to know. Like, should I get a variable loan? Should I get a fixed loan? How do I do it? Do I need to have a different company than the company who has my mortgage? I refied a few years ago, like most of the clients that you guys all know. So things like that, you want to position yourself as that trusted advisor and partner, not just for this transaction, but for every transaction that's going to come up over the next several decades. Because when somebody buys a home, they know that they've got wealth and value in that home from this point forward, but they may not always know what to do with it. And when you can let them know that it's not their job to know what to do with it next, like they're not in that industry. They're in the industry of doing whatever it is that they do, but they don't have to become an expert. They don't have to spend their time to get super educated on what they do, because they've got a person, and that's you. They've got a trusted advisor who's always going to have their back, always going to have their best interest at heart, and will be there to help them, whatever comes in the future, whether that's a swimming pool or an expansion or moving or a second home or your kids going to college or whatever it is. So don't just think about closing a sale. Think about creating a super fan, somebody who's going to want to partner with you and work with you for decades, not just weeks.
And what I love about all that you said was this customer has such a good experience, falls in love with how you make them feel. But not only are they going to come back for all their future transactions, but it also is about them promoting you, becoming an influencer for you. And so that's like one of the benefits. If you hone in on that customer, there is kind of a ripple effect of that.
Oh, there's absolutely a ripple effect. And one of the things that I talk about in the book is we're living in a time where everybody is an influencer. Every single one of you watching this right now is an influencer. I'm an influencer. Melissa is an influencer. What I mean by that is we all have people in our networks who will take an action or not take an action based solely on what we say. Like all of those people who reached out asking for a vendor recommendation when I was like, listen, you could work with them, but my experience wasn't great. Every single one of them was like, ooh, thanks for letting us know. We'll look for somebody else who does what they do. So when you can go out of your way to make someone feel appreciated and valued, and like you really like hit not just a home run, but a grand slam for them, they will tell people. They'll tell people in the moment, and they'll tell people after the fact when they have the opportunity to speak up and make a referral, a recommendation, or an introduction.
And you do that in your book. You've got companies that you rave about and companies you caution people about. So I love it. You brought the stories through that. So that's exactly what you're talking about in promoting or drawing customers back to you or away from you. So it's really critical. Why do you think some of the loan officers don't focus on building super fans?
You know, I think it's one of those things that unless it's something that someone has drawn your attention to, you may just not have thought about it. Like this may be something that you've never thought of before, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like if you, it doesn't mean you've been doing your job poorly. It just means that this is a new way to think about how to lower your customer acquisition costs, lower the time frame for getting somebody from having you in the consideration set to wanting to work with you. It's just a different way of thinking about it, because I think a lot of people are sort of transactional by default, because I mean, even if you look at the title, right? Like a lot of people on this call right now probably are called loan originators. What does that sound like it is your job to do? To originate a loan, right? Like, oh, I originated the loan, like it's over, time to move on. When in reality, if you think about yourself as a, lifetime loan advisor, just that simple change in the title sort of reframes what it is that should be that priority. So I think that if you haven't thought about before how much easier it will be over time to have these lifelong customers, I encourage you to do that. And I think especially the way the market has shifted so much over the past 4 years. You guys have been on a roller coaster. Like there's been a lot that you've been going through. And in, 2019, 2020, 2021, like when things were just coming at you fast and furious, you probably were like treading water, right? Like struggling to keep your head above, just like, let me get to everything I can. Let me get to everything I can. Now that things have changed, it's a really great time to go back and forge some of those deeper relationships that perhaps you just didn't have the capacity to do a couple of years ago. It's never too late to create a relationship with someone, to add value to that person. And what you'll start to see is those seeds that you're planting now absolutely will bloom when it's time to harvest them.
So you've inspired us. We're curious. We want to know, like, we're all in. Everyone is like, yeah, I wouldn't be here if I didn't want to create super fans. So will you teach us? Because the book does a fantastic job of breaking it down and teaching exactly what it means. How do you do it? What's the formula? Would you kind of give us that condensed version of how do you actually create a super fan?
Well, it would be my pleasure, Melissa. Thank you for asking. So I will say something that I talk about for a whole chapter in the book, but I'll just cover really quickly as a concept. I think one of, if not the biggest problem that exists for really anybody today, any business, any brand, anyone who's trying to build their personal brand, is apathy. A lot of times we think there's an awareness problem. Not enough people know who we are. Not enough people know what we do. Not enough people understand what it means, to work in the mortgage industry. But oftentimes that's not the case at all. Plenty of people know, especially the people in your immediate network or like one sphere removed. They just don't care. And the reason they don't care is because you haven't given them a good enough reason to. You haven't broken through that apathy. You haven't connected your story to theirs. So something that I always say and something that I say in the book is superfans are created at the intersection of your story and every customer story. That's how you break through that apathy. That's how you get someone's attention. We are all so busy. We all have so many things going on at every single moment of every single day. You've got to break through that by connecting your story with theirs, by showing why your thing is relevant to their life. And that's how you go from somebody being like, oh yeah, I think I have some friends who like maybe do this, to, oh, you need a loan? I know exactly who you need to call. So that's the first thing to be aware of, is that you've got to break through that apathy, because it's a very, very powerful force. And if you don't do that, like nothing else matters, right? Like the first thing that you've got to do is compete with that apathy. So that begs the question, how do you do it, right? So in the book, I go through a 5-step framework that I call my supermodel. I like for things to be really easy to remember, simple to remember, simple to implement, simple to measure. And so what I've tried to do is distill all of the best practices from sales and marketing and operations and customer experience and customer service and technology into one framework. So in the book, I call it my supermodel. Super is an acronym, SUPER, and we'll go through quickly all 5 of those steps and what they mean so that you can start thinking about how to use them right away. And then I hope you'll get the book. If you check out the book, it of course goes into way more detail about how to implement all of these for yourself and for everyone else on your team, because I know a lot of you are probably leading teams.
Yeah. So S, super.
S, yes. So
Story.
the supermodel, S stands for start with your story. And when I say start with your story, I don't mean lead with your story. I don't mean you should be, like rolling down your window at stoplight saying like, hey, I do loans. What I mean when I say start with your story is everything's got to originate from that story about who you are and why you're doing this. You could be doing anything right now. Why are you working in the mortgage industry? What does it mean? Why are you best positioned to help your prospects and your customers? What's your superpower? If you don't know, how in the world are they ever going to be able to figure it out, right? And the truth is, if you want to go from commodity provider, if you want to go from, I can get you a good rate, or I can get you favorable terms quickly, to that category of 1 who somebody says, I want to work with you because, you've got to figure out that because. And the reality is it's different for every single one of you on this call. We've got 277 participants right now. That's 277 unique stories about why you are the best person to serve your customers. What is it? And it could be a lot of different things, right? It could have something to do with your experience. It could have something to do with the fact that you're gonna stay in touch and you're gonna become that trusted advisor, because maybe you don't just know about mortgages. Maybe you're also gonna be their go-to when they need a new roof or a new landscaper, or, there's like a flood and something happens. So what is it about you and your story? And how can you connect that with your customer story? Who cares about that thing that you do, and why do they care? And that actually brings us to the second step in the supermodel, which is you understand your customer story. What is it that your customer is looking for? Now, what they're looking for may not be what they think they're looking for, right? They may think they're looking for the best rate they can get for a 30-year conventional loan, right? Your job is to really understand what's driving their underlying needs. This is a little bit of like a customer experience turducken, or the movie Inception, because there's there's a framework within a framework. There's an acronym within an acronym. But in the book, when I talk about understanding your customer story, I really dive deeper into things like active listening, empathy, and authority. And I use story as a secondary acronym, because when you're trying to understand your customer story, and this is true of every prospect, every customer that you have, you can use the story framework to go deeper. And that's, what are they struggling with? What transformation are they looking for? What other options are on the table? What reservations might they have? And are you the best person to address all of those needs? So I say in the book, and I've said here already a couple of times, that Superfans are created at the intersection of those two stories, your story and your customer's story. So you've got to do a great job of not just framing your story, why you're the best partner, but really understanding everything about those prospects and customers, both from like a micro level of the individual prospect or customer that you're talking to, the individual loan that you're working on, and also from a macro level, like what are the types of customers that you love working with? Maybe you love working with service members. Maybe you love working with first-time home buyers. Maybe you love working with empty nesters. Maybe you love people who are relocating from out of state and you get to show off your city or your town and help them, plant roots in your community. Whatever it is, you've got to connect your story with that prospect or customer story to help them understand why you aren't just somebody else who can get them a loan, but you are the right person to work with at the right time.
In the book, when you go through this, there's so much fun detail. And you mentioned earlier about the listening model. So you break down, like if you're going to understand their story, you have to actually converse and learn and understand and be an active listener. And you break down how you did that with Keith Urban. So that was kind of cool. People have to go read that story.
Oh, thank you. I just got the sweetest note this morning from Keith's publicist, Paul. He was very happy that we included that story in the book. So yes, I break down the 5 steps that you need for being able to actively listen and retain, and why that's so important. And, one of my favorite quotes, I think I shared this quote when I was at that APM event back in whatever year, before times. It's from Teddy Roosevelt, and it's one of my absolute favorite quotes. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So this idea of empathy and authority, and having both of those, not just in equal weights, but having the empathy come before the authority.
Perfect. All right, now we're to P, right? P, personalize, right?
Yes, P, personalize. There are so many studies and so much data. I share some of it in the book, but really the takeaway is people want customized experiences now. They want personalized experiences, because your customers are comparing you not just to the best experience they've had getting a loan, but to the best experience they've ever had. They expect personalization. They expect personalization. There's something in the book that I talk about. It was a book that I read several years ago that really made an impact on me by an author named Dr. Tony Alessandra. And the book is called The Platinum Rule. And what Dr. Alessandra argues is, we all grew up with the golden rule: treat others the way you want to be treated, which is great advice, right? Straight from the New Testament. But when we're talking about customer experience, it's not enough to just treat people the way you would want to be treated. You should treat them the way they want to be treated, because not everyone would want to be treated the same way as you. And not everyone has the same backgrounds, beliefs, information, experience as you do. So being able to really meet your customers where they're at, to customize or personalize their journey, is so important. And again, every single one of these steps builds on the step before it. That's why it's so critical to understand your customer story, because it's not until you do that that you can truly personalize the experience and customize the journey for them.
I loved all of that. And there was so much good stuff in there. And I wrote down, you have a whole chapter about gifting. So if people are giving gifts to their customers, how you make those personalized, and you never give a gift with any expectations or conditions. So I loved that. And then at the end of that, you wrap up with, your generosity is what matters, not gifting. Even if you don't want to spend any money, you don't have it, can't. It's all about how you make your audience seem, how they feel, are they seen, and are they appreciated? And you can do that without spending money. But I love how you kind of break it into gifts and different. That's a really cool chapter. And you bring the reference back to Taylor Swift, which is cool. And then you kind of end with, it doesn't always take money though. People just want to be seen, heard, and know they matter.
Exactly. And thank you for spotlighting that. And it's so true. I mean, I think about, this week has been a really fun week for me because my book came out and I've had so many people reach out, and there's beautiful flowers behind me from my friend Nadine. There's another beautiful bouquet downstairs, but I've also been so touched by the text messages and the emails and the cards that I've gotten from people just saying, wow, I really love the book. I actually got a really funny text from a friend yesterday that was like, yo, I was prepared to leave you a 5-star review just because I like you, but your book is legit awesome. He's like, sometimes I'm afraid to look at books from friends because sometimes they're not great, but yours is really, really good. I just ordered it for some friends. And I was like, oh, thanks, buddy. But it's that appreciation. It's not about the gift. It's about showing someone that they matter, that you've taken your time and your energy to do something for them.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right, we're to E. Tell us
Yes.
about the E.
Yes. So E stands for exceed expectations. And one of the most sort of irreverent stories that I share in the book is the dog psychic story. I don't know, Melissa, if you remember that one. I talk about.
Oh yeah, I do.
Have you had the opportunity to take your baby to a psychic yet?
Yeah, no.
No. Okay. Yeah. I did not know pet psychics were like a thing that are apparently like super popular with some people. I had a couple of different friends who told me about this pet psychic, and I was like, how do these two people who don't even know each other, that are like from two completely different walks of life, both take their dogs to the same guy, Frank, this dog psychic? So I tell the story in the book about this, one of our rescue pups, Bandit, who we had tried everything. We tried like a couple of different behavioralists and trainers, and he just had so much anxiety and nothing was working. And so our friends were like, you've got to take him to a dog psychic. So the reason I tell the story in the book is we had no idea what to expect going in, and we were cool with that. I was like, I don't want to know. I just want to like show up and have Frank do his thing. And it was such a funny experience. And just sort of like, since you guys have heard this bunch of the story at this point, the very first revelation from that hour, and I'd never like been to any psychic. For me, I'm not into any like paranormal stuff or whatever. But we walk into the office, and Frank, the medium or psychic or whatever, put his hands on Bandit, my dog. And he was like, well, I can see the first problem right now. And I was like, what's the problem? He said, Bandit is not a dog. Bandit is a wild stallion, and he's really upset that everyone keeps treating him like a dog when he's a stallion. And I was like, I don't know what to do with that, Frank. Like, what does he want to go live on a farm? Like, what do we? So anyway, I tell that story in the book because there are some times in your life where you don't want to know what to expect. You're like, I am just doing this. I want to like show up and roll with the punches. Big life decisions, big experiences are like not that time, right? Nobody's like, I want to be surprised. What's it going to be like to finance this house, right? None of your customers have ever been like, surprise me. Let's just roll with the punches and see what happens. So you've got to set expectations. You've got to let your customers know what to expect before, during, and after the transaction. And the during phase is where so many people spend the lion's share of their attention. During would be like from when you first talk to somebody about their needs for their loan through closing or right after. But if you think about it from the customer standpoint, that's just one chunk of the experience. The before is everything that's transpired before they talk to you, right? All of the research they've done, all of the information they've gathered, trying to figure out like, what does all of this stuff mean? So that before period is a really great opportunity for you to differentiate yourself, for you to take that story and connect it to theirs, for you to add value, for you to have things on your website. And I know Melissa and her team do such a great job with assets that you can use that are APM branded. Like, share that, have that available, help people understand what the difference between these loan types are, what these terms mean, what they can expect, so that they feel like they already know what it's going to be like going into that during phase. And then after, so many LOs make the mistake of like, the loan closes, maybe they send a thank you gift and like, that's it. But what is that experience like for your customer? Many times, a few weeks to a few months after they've closed on their loan, they get a letter in the mail that says, hey, your loan's been sold. And they're like, what does this mean? I didn't know to expect this. Like, what is that? And they start getting all of those like junk mail things that look legit because they've got the mortgage company name on it and the loan number on it. And, you know, they're always like a weird color. They're always pink or yellow or green or something. And they're like, wait, what does this mean? Did I do something wrong? Is everything okay? Wait, what? There's a lot of uncertainty, especially for first-time home buyers. So don't give up at closing. Don't think, oh, I've originated the loan, I'm done. I got them to closing day on time. Everything's cool. You've got to continue to set expectations for what happens after the fact. And when you do that, you become that trusted partner. You become that longtime advisor to them. And you can say, oh yeah, pay attention to these things. Don't pay attention to these things. Oh, by the way, like this is what it means to have an escrow analysis. This is what you've got to like keep in mind because your insurance may be going up or down. Like, oh, by the way, whatever it is, what taxes in the municipality where you live, like all of these things. And as the person who's on the other side of it, you don't always think about that as part of the experience, right? Like you might only think the experience is, hi, it's nice to meet you. Yay, congratulations on closing. But there's so much more. So you've got to really stretch the way that you think about the experience so that you can exceed their expectations, not just during, but during the before and during the after.
I love how you paint that vision of how long that experience is. So it does make us pause and look through where can we do that? And you challenge, you say, is there something I can do to elevate this interaction? You kind of in that chapter, like really about where do you do that? And you talk about the elevator. It was at Legoland or something with the elevator. But what I love and how they transformed a slow elevator into an experience. So they can't do anything about the slow elevator, but they made the experience better. And I love the challenge you said is, what is the slow elevator in your business and how can you transform it into a disco party? Because getting a mortgage isn't fun and neither is riding in a slow elevator. So like, but what can you do to transform that? I love that challenge.
Thank you. Yeah, there's so many things that we like throw our hands up in the air. And for you, that might be, oh, it's, you know, my underwriter's taking forever, or, oh, you know, there's a backlog, or, oh, I'm waiting on, you know, the bank statements or whatever it is. There are things that can feel like they're out of your control. And the reality is, even if they are out of your control, your customer does not see it that way. Like to your customer, it's all in your control. It's all your responsibility. Like you are APM. You are the experience department. And even if there's like 15 other people behind the scenes, no irate customer has ever been like, oh, it was someone else's fault. Cool, thanks. Like we're good now, right? Like even if it's not your problem, it is your problem because you're in the experience business. You are in the business of super serving that client. So I talk about this slow elevator at Legoland. Last summer, my family and I went to Legoland. It was our first time. If you've never stayed at the Lego Hotel in California or Florida, they're both super duper fun. We were in Florida and I talk about how slow this elevator ride was to get from the lobby to the 5th floor. But it took me 3 days to notice how slow it was because what Legoland had done was put up a disco ball, put in lights, have music playing. There were all of these cool wraps on the walls. So it was literally a disco dance party. And it was so much fun to go in that elevator that I didn't realize until the 3rd day we stayed there that it was like the slowest elevator ride of my life. And that there was also a really long wait because it was a small elevator. You could only fit one family in at a time. So they didn't say, we can't control the speed of the elevator, we're going to just let people complain. They turned it into something memorable, almost magical. And there are things that you can do too. Like, again, anticipating what are those steps going to be? What are those slow elevators? If you know there's going to be a week that's hard on your customers because they're waiting to find out about something or they've got a lot of work to do, anticipate that in advance. Ask yourself, what can I do to help make that period less stressful, less frustrating? Again, fill in the blank with whatever your slow elevator is, but you are the one who gets to curate and frame all of these things into one experience.
All right, perfect. And the last letter, R, repeat.
Repeat,
repeat.
yes, yes, repeat, repeat, repeat. I know, Melissa, you love quotes like me, so I bet you also really loved the Elizabeth Arden quote that I share in the book. I love this quote. It's from, an amazing female entrepreneur, Elizabeth Arden. She said, "Repetition makes reputation, and reputation makes customers. We build our reputation based on the things we do again and again and again." Customer experience is not a set it and forget it. It's not something that you can do one time and be like, cool, check that box, I'm done now. It's an ongoing commitment to really being excellent, to really caring about your customers. And in Repeat, I talk about systems and processes and automations and some of the things that you can do, some of the things that you can use to free up your time to do more of this type of stuff that I'm talking about, really paying attention to your customers, looking for ways to surprise and delight them, looking for ways to go above and beyond, not just for your customer, but for their kids or for somebody in their family who has something big going on.
Yeah, I wrote down when you said, figure out what works best for you. Don't be afraid to admit when you're no longer adding value to a system or a process. It's just like, okay, I'm going to pay attention to that. But yeah, like you talk about, this might be some of the places where you can leverage technology or hand off some things. So you're putting your time where it matters most. And that the experience they get is replicable. Like they're going to see it over and over again. Their customers they refer are going to get it again. The next customer, like you were quoting with repetition and reputation. Like sometimes we might shine a little bit more with a customer more than another one. And that's kind of the challenge you're giving us, is reputable.
Yeah. And, don't ever be afraid to go back and ask your customers what they loved about the experience and what they didn't. I used to be so terrified to get on post-event calls because I was so terrified somebody was going to say something mean or something wasn't going to be right. And so I just, for the longest time, didn't do them. 45 minutes ago, you were like, oh yeah, you were our #1 rated speaker. Like I had no idea because I probably didn't follow up to ask because I was terrified that the answer might be everybody hated you or, whatever. So don't be afraid to ask your customers to give you an honest assessment of how their experience was, because the more you do that, the more you will figure out not just how to make future experiences better, but also where you shine. And so you've got to, I have some tips in the book for how to do that and how to sort of frame those conversations. But it's so important to get that feedback from your customers because everybody wants to be helpful and everybody wants to be heard. So if you give somebody the opportunity to be helpful by being heard, 9 times out of 10, somebody's going to be like, yeah, absolutely. I would love to, let you know what this process was like for me. And if you ask them to do it in a review or, a recommendation, then you've got that to share.
Perfect. Okay. 2 things. One, everyone, we're going to stay here for a few minutes and let you ask questions to Brittany. Please put it in the Q&A box. We're going to be monitoring that in just a few minutes and we'll go through those. And for those that leave questions, we'll give you a free book. So before we wrap up on the book, will you tell me what was the favorite advice you gave out of the book of all the beautiful and rich pages? What was kind of your favorite?
They're so hard to pick. I think probably my favorite was, I tell a story at the end of the book. Well, so the introduction to this book, or the foreword, was written by a guy named Shep Hyken, who I absolutely love and adore. He's one of the OG customer experience gurus. And I was so excited that he wrote the introduction to the book. And I sort of bookended it with some advice that I got from my son, who's now 5, but was almost 3 at the time. He had come into my office and, kids, they love you. They just love to interrupt you because they want all of your time, all of your attention. He came into my office and I was like, buddy, remember mommy's writing today? I love you. Go back to dad. And he said, what's your book about, mommy? And it was the first time he'd asked what I was writing about. And again, he was almost 3 at the time. And so I tried to explain the concept of creating Superfans in a way that he would, relate to. And I totally expected him to be like, that is dumb. You should write about trucks or something. But instead I was like, what do you think, buddy? And he kind of looked at me for a second and he said, I think you should tell the people to be nice and listen. Like total mic drop. And then he just like kissed me and ran out of the office and kept going. And I was like, wow, be nice and listen. That's really solid advice for creating Superfans. Maybe my kid just wrote my book in 4 words better than I'm doing in 60,000 words. But I told that story. And one of the things that I love about this book is that it's printed in full color. Like it's so pretty. And there's all these posters throughout the book. And so this is the last one at the very end from Cato, be nice and listen. So I think that's probably my favorite advice just because it's got such a personal meaning.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. All right, Drea, we've got a bunch of questions in there. Do you want to start us out and go through some of them?
Yeah, so it starts off with Christy Hardy here. She's asking, as a lender, do you have some tips on how to make the waiting part a disco party?
Great question, Christy. Yes. So I would say one thing is to let people know what is in store for them, right? Like let them know what that wait could be, even if you're just giving them sort of rough guidelines. And if you have something for them that they can do that feels productive during that time, like if you've got somebody who's moving from out of town, you can take that opportunity to say, hey, have you thought about all these things that you're going to need? Have you thought about all these partners? I've got a list of trusted vendor resources who I've used for my family and wanted to send them over to you. So maybe you send that email. Again, you can use automation to do this. Maybe you know, like, okay, I'm going to send this email. And then a few days later or a week later, sending them a note saying, hey, wanted to let you know, we're still in that process that I told you about, but I was wondering, have you guys thought about what lessons you're going to get for your kids? Like, here are a list of some of the best providers or whatever it is. So you're finding a way to reach out, to be intentional, to keep them updated, because a lot of times the stress and frustration from a waiting period comes from the not knowing. And we live in a world where we want to be able to track anything in real time. We want to see exactly the street our Uber driver's at. We want to know exactly when our Domino's pizza comes out of the oven. So just giving people visibility into where they are in the process so they don't have as much stress and anxiety about how much longer is it going to take, like what do I need to expect.
Brittany, it's so good that it wasn't just about communication expectations. You layered in a little touch, a little personalization with that. So I love that.
Yeah.
All right, Drea, what do we have next?
Awesome. So this one's a quick one. Charles Belsick would like to know if Brittany does any one-on-one coaching outside of the book.
Oh, thank you so much, Charles. I'm not doing one-on-one coaching right now, just because I'm focused on promoting this book and doing speaking events. But thank you so much for asking. I will say though, for anybody who buys the book, you can get a free course that I recorded. It's about, I think, a little over an hour of videos, and there's a workbook with it, and you can get it for free if you buy the book. So, Alex, if you're on this call, if you want to drop that into the chat or send it over to the APM team for them to drop in the chat. I'm sure Drea would be happy to do that. So it's like coaching, but you get it instantly on your own schedule, and that's free for anyone who orders the book.
Yeah,
Awesome.
throughout the book, you reference some other things that they can get off your website and stuff. So it's pretty cool. All right.
Catherine Silas would like to know, how do you train and teach your team members to implement these practices?
Love the question, Catherine. I would say the first thing to know is that if you don't define it, they're not going to be able to replicate it. So a lot of times we think what we do is like really mysterious or like only we could do it. And really what that means is we haven't taken the time to break it down. We haven't taken the time to do the science behind the art. So one of the first things that you need to do to be able to teach your team to replicate what you do is by explaining to them step by step what it is that you do. So I tried to do that throughout the book with the supermodel to say, here are the things that your team needs to do. I'm trying to think of what I ended up calling the teams chapter in the book. But there's a chapter all about the employee experience, because the reality is your customer experience is never going to be better than your employee experience. And your employee experience is predicated on being able to show why everything that you do matters, connecting the act with the intention. And when you can do that, what you do is you take what you're doing and you elevate it from, just like a position or a paycheck to a purpose. You're saying, this is why we're doing this. Like, this is why we're so passionate about each of these things. And it may not feel like to you that it matters that we've got a step in the CRM that says, hey, make sure you talk to every new customer and fill out this form of their favorite things. Like, you may think that's a waste of your time, but it's not, because if you don't do that, we don't know that on their half birthday, we're going to send them a card with M&Ms because M&Ms are their favorite, or whatever it is that you've done to connect the information that you have about your customers to the actions to show them that they matter to you.
Awesome.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay. So then we also have, ooh, this one's a good one. What is the best way to figure out your slow elevator?
That is a great question. I would say number one is always going to be to talk to your customers. So if you've got a customer, whether, it was like a 3-star process, 4-star, 5-star, whatever, if they will talk to you, don't be afraid to ask them. The other thing I would say, what keeps you up at night? Like, what stresses you out? What's the point where you're like, oh, I know I'm going to have a bunch of emails from customers about this? Or what are those emails that you don't want to answer, or those phone calls that you don't want to pick up when you're like, oh, I know it's somebody reaching out about this thing. Those things that sort of like give you pause or make you feel a little bit of dread are probably your slow elevators.
That's a great answer. It's like hard to think about things like that. I love it. We have a lot of people asking if your book is available on Audible.
It is. Yes, I did an audio version of this book. If you go to Amazon, which I'll drop, I think I can drop in the chat. I'll drop a link in the chat. You can get the beautiful hardcover version. You can get the Audible version, or you can get a iBook version or ebook version for Kindle. And that is beautiful in full color as well.
Perfect. Yeah, I know there was a lot of questions about Audible, so it seems like there's so much interest in your book. That's great.
Oh, thank you. I had so much fun recording the audiobook. It's funny. I thought it would be easy because I have a podcast and I speak for a living, but it's hard to record an audiobook. It takes a long time. It's like a very different discipline to like speak right up into a microphone and do it for, I think it was like 14 hours we worked to record the book that's like 6 hours long. So I'm glad you guys are interested in it. We worked hard on that one. Thank you.
We have Jill James here asking, what if asking for feedback, what happens if that process is totally a disaster, which can totally happen sometimes?
Well, here's what I would say, Jill. Wouldn't you rather know that it was a total disaster than not know? And wouldn't you rather tell them than everybody they know? That's perfect. It's so important to get that feedback, because if you don't know it's disaster, you can't fix it. And like, sometimes people don't care. I told you guys before, I'd been sort of telling everybody who was asking me about this one particular vendor referral, like, oh, this vendor is a little bit of a disaster. Don't work with them. I tried to tell the vendor along the way. I was like, here's the problem. Here's what's going wrong. And there were just so many things that they were sort of like, don't care. Like, I definitely felt like, oh, I'm not a priority customer, which either means no customer is a priority customer, or my, several $1,000s that I spent was like a nothing burger to them and they don't care. To me, I was like, okay, either they treat every customer this way, or I'm just not the type of customer that they want. But because I tried to like give them feedback at every step and every turn, and the communication was just so terrible, I was like, okay, I have no choice as a customer than to assume this is how they treat all customers. So when somebody asks me, that's what I'm going to say. Had they cared about my concerns at some point along and said, oh my gosh, this never happens. This isn't how things normally go. We're so sorry. Here's what we're going to do to like try to make it better. Then I absolutely would have just said like, oh yeah, here's this great vendor. Feel free to, let me connect you guys over email or whatever. But instead they didn't hear that. So don't ever be afraid to ask for feedback. And if something is a disaster, be honest about the things that you're going to try to fix, but don't know if you can, and be honest about the things that you fixed right away based on their feedback. Most people don't expect you to be perfect. They expect you to try your best and to fix things when they go wrong.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really good take on that. We have Andrew Christopher here wants to know, what's the one main automation and delivery mechanism you've seen greatest success with while keeping it personalized? Seems difficult without dedicating a lot of time to an individual.
That is a
So
great
what's
question.
the main automation and delivery mechanism that you've seen the greatest success with while keeping it personalized?
I'm trying to think of one that would be really useful to you all. I would say in terms of, you guys are all using Total Expert, right?
We do
I would
use
say
Total Expert.
yeah, they're a Total Expert is such an amazing, powerful tool, creating journeys that work for you and having the automation for the information that people are going to get at every step of the journey is going to be really powerful and work really well. And you can also set an automation that says, you know, I want this gift to go to this customer at this point of every journey. That's going to be another really powerful way. Even something that seems small, like setting an automation in Total Expert to trigger the ordering of a handwritten birthday card to go to them from a company like Postable or Punk Post or whoever it is that you guys use. There are so many that integrate with Total Expert, something like that, so that they know that you're thinking about them. They're getting something from you based on a trigger that you've set up.
Awesome. I love it. You're so good at answering these questions. I see why you were a favored speaker.
Thank you. That's so nice.
we
You guys are
have-
so good at asking questions. You're making it easy for me.
Right. I know. Well, there's so many for you as well. So we have Shauna Schraft. She wants to know what's something that a company has done that's wowed you and turned you into a super fan.
Hey, Shauna. I love talking about customers or talking about companies that have wowed me. There are so many examples that I share in the book. One of my favorites is I talk about Chewy. Anybody who has not shopped with Chewy.com, it is an amazing place to get your pet food and pet needs. They have wowed me so many ways over the years, from like answering the phone in the middle of the night. One time when I was afraid I had poisoned one of my dogs because he licked the flea and tick medicine off of the other dog. I'd like put this goopy stuff on their back and forgot to put them in their crates. And I was like, oh my God, my dog's going to die. And it was the middle of the night and I called Chewy and they not only reassured me that I wasn't a terrible dog mom, but also looked up all the ingredients, said it was fine, and then said, hey, by the way, did you know you can give your dogs flea and tick protection in a chew? And I was like, I absolutely did not know that. How can we make that happen? They called the vet, got the prescription for the flea and tick medicine, sent it my way, and credited me back because I had just ordered like $200 worth of the goopy stuff because it was like a 6-month supply for both dogs or whatever. They refunded my credit card for that goop, told me to donate it to a shelter, and we were all good. They've wowed me so many times over the years, including sending these amazing hand painted portraits of my pups, Bandit and Bear. So
those
Chewy
are so cute.
Thank you. Aren't these fun? And here's the thing, you guys,
Yeah.
Chewy has done this for like tens of thousands of customers at this point, right? It is not that hard to get a portrait of your pet. Anybody who's a Chewy customer, like there's a hashtag printed on every box, share a picture of your pups or a video of your cats or hamsters or fish or whatever you have. You're probably going to get something cool like this from Chewy. But here's the thing, it still feels amazing. I don't care that they've done this for tens or hundreds of thousands of other customers, because when they did it for me, when it was about Bear and Bandit, it still felt personal because it was for me. And your customers are the same way, whether you're making somebody, you know, a puzzle of the listing photo from their house, which is a story that I share in the book about somebody who thanked his customers for letting him be part of their financial home journey puzzle, whether you're making somebody, you know, that or a watercolor painting of their house or whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter. You can do it 10,000 times. It's still going to feel personal for each of those customers because it's about them. And that's why that P in the supermodel is so important. That personalization can take something from like, oh yeah, so what, to I will remember this forever.
Absolutely. I agree with that. Chewy is so good to their customers. I've always had great experiences. So great example on that one. We have Russell Hillier here who wants to know what your best approach is for asking for referrals, because a lot of loan officers miss out on that huge part of a transaction.
Great question, Russell. So I would say part of it is knowing that you should not be asking for a referral at the end. You should be asking for a referral multiple times throughout the process, even if it's just saying, hey, you're gonna see this email asking for a referral, I would love for you to make that referral, or I would love for you to leave that review or recommendation, and here's why. So when it comes to reviews and recommendations, let people know why they matter before you ask for it. Because if somebody's never worked in sales, or if they've never had a commission-based position, they may just not know. Like, to them, introductions aren't like the holy grail. It's just like something that, you know, may matter or may not matter. So with referrals, have a script that you use in an email to make it super simple. And when you do finally get to the point of asking for that at the end, say something like, hey, Josh, it has been so great working with you. I love working with customers like you because fill in the blank. If you have buddies who need a loan, I would really appreciate you sending them my way. And if you do, I'll make sure that they get white glove, velvet rope, VIP treatment, because any friend of yours is a friend of mine. So set it up that way, make it really easy for someone to make the referral or the introduction, whether that's by giving them a couple of sentences that they can use to copy and paste, or, you know, making it super easy in whatever way makes sense for you. And then after somebody makes a referral, be sure to thank not just the person that you're talking to, but the person who made that referral. Like, let them know that that introduction materialized and thank them for it. And that can either be through an email, through a card, through a gift, whatever it is, but you want to make sure you always close that loop, because if somebody makes a referral to you and then they just like never hear anything, they're going to assume it wasn't important, and they're probably not going to make another referral in the future. So always make sure you go back and close that gap. That should absolutely be an item that's a task in your CRM that's automated, so that you don't forget. When somebody goes in as a referral, you need to make sure that that referee is thanked, and maybe thanked more than once, depending on what that process looks like.
Absolutely. I can't agree enough on that. I do want to close this out with one question. We have a couple people asking if you could repeat the Elizabeth Arden quote.
Yes. Repetition makes reputation, and reputation makes customers. And for anybody who loves quotes, something that I learned writing this book is that when you put a quote at the beginning of a book, it's called an epigraph. I included tons of epigraphs in this book, like 30. So like, here's a great Bernard Baruch quote. So if you love quotes, you will love creating Superfans.
All right. Thank you all for your questions. There were more questions than we had time for. Dang it. Because we're at the top of the hour, we want to give it back to Brittany for being our guest and being so fantastic. Her book dives into a lot more of this in detail. So for those that were here asking questions, we have a variety of countless books we're going to send out to you for submitting those in, and download the Audible just to hear her speak through the book is going to be great. So Brittany, thank you so much for joining us on APM Live, helping us turn our client base into super fans, helping our loan officers do better, smarter, just great business as advisors, and really connecting with customers. It's such good work. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry we didn't have time for all the questions, but anybody who wants to send me a question, I'm Brittany@BrittanyHodak.com. You can also find me at Brittany Hodak on whatever your favorite social channel is. And I'm trying really hard for this book to be a bestseller. So anybody who's considering picking up a copy, I really, really am thankful for anybody doing that today or tomorrow. And you can, of course, leave a review on Amazon or anywhere else that you get your books. And that would be incredibly helpful as well.
All right, thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.